like stepping out of nuclear proliferation treaties, and how far could that be a response to the fear that something similar could happen to its own resources as is happening in those other regions?
Well, I will talk quite a bit about Russia because I'm going to talk about Central Asia and the Caspian Sea and the Caucasus. So I will talk more about Russia then. Russia is unique because it's the only great power with an excess of energy. All the other great powers today have a deficit of energy, which is why Russia looms so large today in the world political scene. My topic is, or rather the talk is advertised as Energy, Politics, and Power. And we're used to thinking about power, positive power. The United States is a great power. It has economic power, it has military power. We have to start thinking about power in the negative. The United States has all this power, but it is dependent on imported oil, and this is the source of weakness. China is also dependent on imported energy, and this is a source of great weakness. Russia, alone of the great powers, is not dependent on imported energy. As I say, at a time when energy is becoming increasingly scarce, this explains its sudden prominence. It is a source of power to Russia that it is an energy surplus country. And it's beginning to use that energy surplus power to intimidate the countries around it. And I don't know the rest of I don't understand the rest of your question.
Well, because Russia right now is stepping out of nuclear proliferation treaties, and it's also trying to enhance its military power within the limits that were set by those treaties where it is still in. And I was wondering how far is that?
This is I see. I think I understand what you're saying. Yes. I think the Bush administration, I think it's very hard for Europeans to understand the United States because this is also true because most Americans don't understand Washington. So there's a commonality here. We have an expression inside the Beltway. Maybe you've heard that expression. The Beltway is the highway that Interstate 495 that surrounds Washington. Most Americans think the Cold War ended, but that's not true in Washington, inside the Beltway. Inside the Beltway, there is a residue of anti-Soviet sentiment. The Soviet Union doesn't exist. But anti-Soviet sentiment still is powerful in the Bush administration, in the Defense Department, in the State Department, in the think tanks. President Bush hoped that, President Bush Jr. hoped that Vladimir Putin would become an energy partner of the United States, that he would open up Russia's energy industry to domination by American energy corporations. They met in 2002 and 2003. They had some summits. President Bush actually thought that Putin would open up Russia's vast energy reserves to American corporate exploitation. President Putin has slammed the door in his face, as well as European companies as well. Shell in particular, Royal Dutch Shell in particular. This has given a revival to this Cold War sentiment. And the U.S. has now come to view Russia as a potential enemy. So what you're describing is not initiatives on Russia's part, it is a reaction to anti-Russian activities undertaken by Washington, namely the deployment of missiles in Poland, which are viewed in Moscow as anti-Russian. But I think they're tied to what I discussed. Thank you for your questions. Interesting question.
Shall I,
You better pick.
I better pick them, otherwise we. Okay. So we'll start off with the gentleman on the left there.
Thank you very much. I was curious because at the beginning of your presentation you mentioned that the United States currently consumes 1/4 about of the world's energy resources, and you mentioned that it consumes slightly more than Europe at this point in time. But ever since you've been painting a very bipolar picture of the conflict, that is China's involvement and the US involvement, but you haven't mentioned any of the other parties that also have a stake in the game. So what does Europe do, for example, to secure their own interests in the energy sector?
Yeah. Just to give you the percentage, in 2030, the U.S. and China together alone, the U.S. and China alone are expected to consume 2/5 of the world's energy, just those two countries, in 2030. And Europe